So I'm doing a rivet feasibility study. I had planned to use rivets to mount the latch, and I've done some scale sketches because I can still change at this point, but if I start preparing the case itself for one type of latch attachment or the other, and then I got something wrong, then it'll be a bigger mess to correct. So I figured out exactly where all the different layers will be along the edges, and this is representative of the base plate of the latch, and this is the this is the 1/8 of an inch masonite, this is the 3/8 inch backing wood strip, and this is the valance that the rivet will have to go through. And then I had planned to put a backup washer there, but I don't think I need to have the backup washer as long as the valance is there. Either case, they're about the same thickness, so I've prepared a piece of the scrap wood and scrap masonite, and I have a washer to stand in for the valance, and I have the latch, and I have a 3/16 inch diameter, that's the outer diameter, aluminum rivet designed to go up to 5/8 inch grip range, and that's exactly what it is. But that's what it is if you don't count the valance or the rivet. So that's a bit of a concern. So one thing I can do is possibly countersink a little bit, but I'd prefer not to do it that way. I think I'm just going to do a test using the full thickness, which is 1/16 inch greater than the 5/8. So I have my pop rivet in my riveting tool. I have a washer representative of the latch base plate. I'm through the masonite, I'm through the wood, and I'm through the other washer representative of the valance itself. Okay, I've popped the rivet shaft off, and there's the riveted joint, and now I'm going to do a stress test to see if I can pull that joint apart. It looks like it's swelled enough where it's probably okay, but I just want to see how much force it'll take before it pops. Of course, what I'm really going to be testing here is the masonite, but yeah, I think that'll hold. It's right on the edge of the grip range, but with 2 rivets per latch and 2 latches, I think that'll be plenty strong. So that's the approach I'm going to use. So the cornet's going to sit in here just about like this. I've determined that I'm going to use 3 hinges. The case is small. I was going to do with 2, but I bought 3 hinges. I decided to use them up, so I'm going to have one about here, one in the center, and one about here. I've made backing strips or reinforcing strips. These are going to be here for a couple of reasons. One is that I need a place to sink the screws from the hinges, and one is that I want to spread the stress over a wider area. Otherwise, there's a lot of stress right along the edge. So one of the screws will actually go through here, and the other one will go through here, and being glued to the masonite that will distribute the stress of that point over a wider area. And similarly, I'm going to be putting a couple up under here in the location of the latches for similar reasons. Reinforcing stress distribution and to provide a solid backing for the hardware. Okay, I've got 3 hinge reinforcing rails epoxied in there, and I've laid a couple valance strips across to distribute the weight of my drill. That just helps push them down. And after another 10-15 minutes, I'm going to flip the case over and do the same to the latch reinforcing rails. That seems like a good position for the latches, just eyeballing it. Good proportions. Alright, now I'm putting the latch reinforcing strips. They're epoxy glued in just like I did the other ones. And I have, as already mentioned, the 3 hinge reinforcements and the 2 latch reinforcements now added to the cover. Alright, time to mount the valance on the boxes, on the box halves. The male valance strips go on the lid and just lays on its support wood strip. And the trick is to get it so the flat here is on the same plane, so the valance isn't either too far that way or this way. And because they tend to flop around left to right, I like to start with the center and put in a screw in the middle, or approximately the middle, and then bring it around on the ends. If I start at one end and anything is off, then it's harder to get it straight. But I realized I just made a boneheaded mistake here because I'm going with 3 hinges. Some of the mounting hardware for the middle hinge could possibly get in the way of yeah, I have to make sure there's no conflict between the mounting for the valance and the hinges, and I think it will be actually. Or maybe not. Maybe I've dodged a bullet. That's where the hole is going to be there. But it's right next to this. I don't like that. So I'm going to re-drill this one just a little bit off to one side so that I don't have that conflict. On the bigger cases, I usually just use my cordless drill with a screwdriver bit. On these smaller cases, I've been using my Dremel electric screwdriver. I think they have more than one model. I think this is a HSES-01, and I'm using a Milwaukee tool that I almost never get a chance to use. It's a pivoting head. Goes up to, I think, about 30 degrees. I'm just using 3/4 inch, I think these are number 6 sheet metal screws. And I think it should be obvious the reason I'm using this bent head or offset head driver is because I wouldn't be able to as well get a screwdriver down from the top and have it engage the Phillips head, and it might strip out, so this solves that dilemma. Okay, there's that one. Go with that one. And it's the same thing with the female valence strips. Okay, there's the bottom half with its valence strip. And the top half with its valence strip. So that now locks the top and the bottom together, even without any other hardware. But yet it easily lifts off. I'm going to do one more sanity check to make sure I haven't cut into an area where the instrument's going to go, because I can still cut off a little bit of the valence if it turns out where I'm causing things to be too tight in regards to clearance. No, we're still looking good, with the horn being approximately like this in the case. There's perfectly good clearance. There's not a lot, there's probably a 1/2 inch clearance, but nothing that's gonna cause any problem getting the horn in and out of the case. Alright. I'm ready for doing color coat on here, the finished painting, and I would usually do some additional woodwork on here, cutting holes for the latches and cutting holes and mounting the carrying handles and things, but on here there's nothing that's going to require any holes to be cut in the wood. It's all just surface mount, and I can do that just as well after the rest of the painting is done, so I might as well do that now. I'm using the Krylon Industrial Acrylic lacquer to distinguish it from the acrylic enamel. That was the primer, but this is compatible. They're intended to go together. And here's the Krylon part number, and it's what they call Safety Blue, OSHA Safety Blue, or True Blue is the commercial name. Once again, I'm going to use my goggles to keep the spray off my glasses, and my two-stage respiration equipment so I don't inhale any dangerous fumes. Okay, 4 coats of the color coat sprayed on. I decided against doing a sanding between the 3rd and 4th coats. The lacquer dries very quickly, and I was just evaluating the way it looked and decided that it was fine the way it was. I didn't really think I was going to get an improvement from doing another sanding, so I just let it go the way it is. Okay, there's the painted case. First thing I'm going to do is protect the corners and edges of the case, so I'm going to put on the rubber feet, and then I'm going to put on the corner reinforcements, and then I'll mount the hinge and latch hardware, and then I'll start working on the blocking for the instrument itself. I've put in 2 strips of 1/4-inch craft plywood, epoxied down, and that gives me something to put screws into for these feet. So to put the corners on, because they're stamped and have rounded corners, they won't fit on these very sharp corners without a certain amount of wobble, unless I take off a bit of the corner there. And what I usually use for that is just a Dremel saw or something equivalent, much like that. And then I can fit the corners on, but really, to fit best, I should still shave a little bit of the corners off here up to the point where they're still covered by the metal. So for using that, I'm going to shift to a milling bit on the Dremel. That'll make better work of all these little trimming operations. More like that. And now this fits on there much better. I actually went a little too far here. I'm going to have to touch that up just a tad. And there we go, that's one down. And these screws are anchored into the 1-inch square vertical pieces, the vertical frame members, so they're in there solid. Okay, the lid has all 4 corners screwed on, and hopefully the base now has these pieces solidified in their epoxy enough to start doing the holes for that. Okay, the bottom half of the case has its corners on, and I've drilled 4 pilot holes for the feet. Here are the rubber feet and their screws. The screws are too long. I'm going to put them in and then cut them off with a cutoff wheel on the Dremel for the excess length. There are the screws extending through the wood. Dremel cutoff wheel. Okay. Cut off screws. A little bit of burning of the wood from friction from the cutoff wheel, but that's fine. Okay, time to put the hinges on. For the bottom half of the case, figuring that the hinge pivot will be right here, it's clear that the inner hole, the one closest to the pivot, will be in line with the thick part of the valance, and the other hole further out will just be into the wood strip. But that's, let's see, yeah. So there's the same thing for the upper half of the case, and the inner hole is not on the thick part of the valance, it's just got the thin part. So I have a number 8 sheet metal screw here, and it's just about the perfect length to go through the 1/8 inch masonite and the 3/8 inch backing strip, and an 832 by 3/4 inch long bolt will go through the thicknesses of the wood and masonite and stick just past the thickness of the thin part of the valance, so that'll be appropriate for the case top. And then a similar bolt, about 1 inch long, has enough length to go through the thick part of the valance all the way through and thread into it for additional strength. So I have all my hardware picked out here. I need to mark where the holes will be, drill pilot holes and clearance holes, and in some cases tap through into the aluminum valance, and then install the hardware. So I've marked my alignment guidelines. Alright, I've got pilot holes drilled, and then the outer ones appropriately enlarged to a good size for the sheet metal screws to go into the wood. And then I picked out an 18 and a 29 drill for the 832 bolts. The smaller drill, the 29, is the tap size, so that's going to go through here on the inner holes, and then I'm going to enlarge the holes with the number 18 just down to the aluminum to make the screw go through the wood part easier. Although I may forego that and just tap the wood too. It's not the way I usually do it, but it's probably a good idea here. Okay, those holes are opened up all the way through with a number 29 drill, and I've got an 832 tap chucked up in my drill motor, so I'm going to tap those holes. Oops. So on the last hinge, I'll just describe better what I'm doing. This is the 3/4 inch 832 bolt going into a threaded hole. I take it down where it's almost tight but not quite. And now I've got the 1-inch bolt going through the thicker valance. Since it's tapped, it doesn't offer much resistance. Then I've got my sheet metal screws, which are forming their own threads into the wood. And I have a fairly small pilot hole to make them go in nice and tight. Now I'm making sure they're all good and tight. Alright. Okay, hinges are on. Okay, let's see how well those work. Of course, the case is going to tip backwards. It's a little top heavy. That was an unintended consequence. I've not had a case that tipped over backwards before, but I can't do anything about that. The goal was to make a narrow case, and the player's just going to have to deal with that. I've got a couple of other cases that are modern cases that also tip over backwards if you don't hold the bottoms down, so it's not like that's never happened. It's just, it's not happened on a case I've made before. And I can't think what I would have done differently except make the cover very shallow, which wouldn't have worked out with the other critical dimensions. So and that's the way the stop hinges work. They don't allow the cover to go back more than that amount. The reason it's not tipping backwards is because my drill is holding it. So I'm just going to clean up the holes here a little bit where I drilled in the tapping bolts, and it's about right. They're tapping in just about the amount I wanted them to. I've taken the lower front valance off so I can better drill the holes that the rivets will go through. Have to clean up more drilling debris. Okay, I've got my 2 pop rivets. I've got my holes drilled through, and I'm verifying that I can insert the rivets all the way through and into the other side. Not having used this type of latch before, I ran into a small snag. Even though I'm using a standard rivet type and sized to fit the hole, the clearances were not such that I could actually fit the front head down past the pivoting part here. So I had to file off a little flat on it so it would go down. And then the rude awakening is that this latch mechanism gets in the way of the rivet tool. It can't get down far enough to press against the head. So I made this little tool out of 3 layers of 1/8 inch masonite super glued together and drilled, so it'll fit on like that. It's a little bit cattywampus at the moment, but it allows the rivet tool to get up higher and still pull. But of course now with this offset, the internal gripping and ratchet mechanism of the tool won't grab it. That's a bummer. I'll try a couple of my other cheaper, older rivet tools just on the off chance their ratchets might be a little further down. Well, the other 2 rivet tools had the same issue, so that was sort of a wasted effort. Alright, the latches are on, and I've got the pop rivets swelled down there, and for the lower one I just put that 1032 bolt through with a nut. There wasn't enough room to put a washer on it, but that's fine. And that compressor runs way more often than it should. There's a leak somewhere, even though I can't hear it. It's bleeding out. Anyway, it always seems like it goes off just when I'm trying to narrate something on a video. Anyway, I have a little super glue acting as Loctite because I ran out of Loctite. And so those should be adequately anchored at this point. Now I have to put the keepers on. As I've shown in my most recent narrated slideshow of building a larger case along these same lines, when putting the latches on to keep them tight after everything's assembled, it's important to put a set of clamps on and squeeze the case as tightly closed as it'll go when fitting the latches. Because if you don't do that, then even though you think it's tight, once you relax everything, the lid's going to be a little loose. So I take my keeper and I'm sliding it through here, and I'm pulling it tight, and I know where to put the holes. But the extra trick on this is to then offset the holes ever so slightly in that direction to make it even a little tighter. Okay. And strangely enough, mounting these latches on here tip the balance between the case tipping over and not tipping over. How about that? It's still right on the hairy edge, but if you just sit it down, it'll stay where it's at. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to try to build in something, I don't know quite how it'll work yet, some sort of a device to hold a couple of bottles of valve oil and a mouthpiece. And I'm probably going to try to put it up front here somewhere, and that'll also put more weight forward. That'll help a bit. May also end up going up here somewhere, but then that'll make it top heavy, so I really don't want to do it that way. That kind of thing is usually left to the last minute because I just can't visualize enough details to plan it in from the beginning. Not without setting up all sorts of elaborate CAD models and things, which is something I'm just not going to do with these cases. They're all one-offs, and it's just easier to kind of wing it with a general plan and tweak it as it goes. Something I almost always do around this point in the case assembly is put the horn in the case, and assuming that the weight of the foam, which is very lightweight, that's the foam used for blocking, is very lightweight, and it's not going to make a substantial difference in the balance of the case if I have a little more or a little less here or there. The things that weigh the most are the case itself and the instrument. So I put the horn in its general position in the case and put it on something that I can rotate, like a piece of conduit or a piece of pipe or anything, and roll it back and forth. So right about there is the balance point. Right about there. And I'll mark that. I've now glued in a piece of 1/4 inch craft plywood to make the handle reinforcing plate. It helps distribute the stress to the frame members, and it also just provides a more solid base into which to put screws, because the masonite by itself won't take that kind of treatment or stress. And I've used regular wood glue for that. The first time I've used regular wood glue on this case, I haven't been happy with the JB Weld product that I had talked about before. At least down here in the summer with the higher humidity, it seems to take forever to set up. Indeed, the areas down here that I did with the DevCon product, even though it's nearly cured, it's still just a little bit less than rock hard still. I mean, you can't put your fingernail into it, but it still feels just a hair tacky somehow. And you know, looking it up on the website, that is a side effect of trying to use it in a humid environment without accelerating it with, you know, heat or something like that. So I'm sure that it'll get better over time, but right now, just working on this over 2 or 3 days, it's disappointing how long that takes to really cure fully. Alright, I've made two 2-inch thick blocks for the ends of the case, and they're chewed away to fit inside the frame and have as much surface area contact as possible for best adhesion of the glue or the adhesive that I'm going to use. As mentioned in my other videos on this subject, this is polyethylene foam, closed cell polyethylene foam, and it's almost like wax as far as what will stick to it. In other words, not very much. And when I have all these sawn surfaces, it opens up the pores, or the cells that were formerly closed, and allows the adhesive to get a bit of a grip on it. But it really works best if you can get a pretty tight mechanical fit and then use the adhesive just to keep it from getting loose. The actual strength is in the tight mechanical fit. So it's just a matter of doing several passes with the table saw, blade height, and fence distance set, and then a couple of the smaller ones I chewed out with my bandsaw just because it was quicker. So these fit down here. I can kind of get them in, counting on the flexibility of the foam. That one's already in there. The bell's going to go up against here, and that shows that I need to make a cutout on this side to clear the bottom bow of the horn. So that'll be the next step. Okay, the blocking is progressing nicely. I've got the bottom support block down there now, and it's holding the instrument up. I put a bubble level across the highest point here, make sure it's level, and then I measure from the bottom of that to the rim of this, and I know exactly how high this is sticking up, and it gives me about 5/8 of an inch clearance between there and the top. Looks like it should hit, but it's really a full 3 inches here, so it works out just about right. And I actually wanted to give it a hair more clearance, so I just pulled this piece out and took it down a little bit lower on the notch, so the horn is sitting just a degree or two lower, and that'll actually help it go in better at the bell, because the bell isn't up completely flush, which creates more friction taking it in and out of the case. So it is essentially flat up against there, but it's off by just a degree or so. So now I want to support the instrument somewhere. It's already supported on the bell rim down there, but I want to support it probably right about in the middle of the case. So halfway between here and here, I'm going to put a pillow block on here that sits under here and supports it there. I'm just stacking little pieces of foam down there, scrap foam, until I get a good fit underneath there, so I know how high that has to be. And I just want to clarify that I think all the foam I'm going to use for blocking in this case is from my stock of 2-inch thick closed cell polyethylene foam. Chemically cross-linked is another thing, so I forget what the weight is. I think it's 2 pound, but I'm not sure. Definitely closed cell cross-linked polyethylene foam. It has a very smooth satiny finish, whether or not you cut it. It can be machined just like balsa wood or something. It weighs almost nothing. It is chemically inert. It won't react with anything because it's closed cell. It won't absorb water or oils the way foam rubber will. It's always soft against the instrument. It won't scratch it. It's really the ideal material for padding delicate items, and it's also strong enough, even though you can push into it, it springs back, if not instantly, within a very short time, resumes its original shape. The material itself is naturally springy, fairly elastic, and with all the closed cells of air inside, which is a good percentage of the makeup of this is air, I just take it and whittle away at one of the many blocks. I've got big, 4x8 or 4x6 sheets of this stuff, but I have this scrap piece I've been making most of the pieces for this small case out of. So I've got my next part marked out. My Sharpie marker that I've been using is just about dry, so I'm almost scratching the material rather than marking it at this point. Need to buy new Sharpies. Okay, middle pillow block. So now the horn is supported from the bottom, and most likely what I'm going to do here is support it from one place on the top. On a bigger horn I'll have 2 or 3 pillow blocks on the top pushing down, not just the ones it's sitting on. But on this particular instrument, I think it should be adequate to have one pushing down right here. This is a well-supported point on the horn. It's really just to keep it from bouncing out of this in rough handling, or if the case gets tipped over or something. So really just a light pressure at this point is all it really needs. It's not going to go anywhere if it has that. So I need to build a pillow block I was originally going to do it and have it dock with this, but this is so far down, the pillow block would stick out about this far from the top of the case. It'd be very unwieldy. But for this one here, the pillow block only, you know, it's going to be up inside of here instead of sticking out. So I think that's the best way to do it, and it's just a couple inches from the center line of the horn. So putting a little pressure here should be just fine. Okay, the sole top pillow block is there. It sits right on the edge of the handle reinforcing plate, and that puts it, the camera's having some parallax issues, but this is about in line, so the mouthpiece receiver ends up falling maybe a 1/4 inch inside this slot. The slot down here at the small end is the width of this, and then it's slightly tapered in, so if the horn is a little bit this way, it'll help steer it in to that sweet spot. And this is where it comes down to. Just the smallest amount of compression is ideal. Sort of like doing this. So I think that's good. I don't really think I need any other blocking in this case to keep everything in position and intact. There's no advantage to blocking this. Nothing's going to be gained by blocking this, plus it's a really awkward shape. Yeah, I don't think so. The only thing I might possibly do is, just for the hell of it, put another block here to push down on this. I might just do that. So I've worked out the dimensions of a small accessories box that will go up against this pillow block and go over to about here, and it can't go further right because it'll hit one of the tuning slides that sticks down in this area, so it'll be about this wide to here, and it'll consist of a 1/4 inch piece of craft plywood that runs alongside this pillow block, another one that runs here, one along the back, one along the front. I'm not using the masonite for structural purposes insofar as this box goes. So it'll be a 4-sided box that just sits in here, notches into the bottom of the frame, and then it'll have, because of the overhang here, the lid will flip up, but if I hinge it towards the back, number one, it'll be a pain to get at the hinge screws, so I'll put in a plate here that's out to about where my thumb is, and that'll be glued to the top of the box, and then the hinges will be on the front edge of that, so when the lid flips up, it'll be coming up pretty much straight along the valence here. Actually, I have it set up so it'll be tipped slightly backwards. And then the lid, when it flips down, should come down and reach the front here. But I'm also considering doing a similar deal with a plate here, just so I don't have to worry so much about clearances. And let's see, I think that will do it. I have my little brass hinges here from the hardware store. So I'm going to start cutting out the craft plywood. And before I do that, I'm going to use the adhesive to glue these pillow blocks in place, so that can be setting up while I'm making the little box. So I've just smeared some liquid nails, and I use the Liquid Nails heavy duty construction adhesive. It's the stuff that seems to work out best in the tests I did many years ago. So I have it on pretty much every surface. I missed a couple. I have to get that surface in that one. And then I'll stick the foam piece in there and repeat for the others. Okay, 2 side panels with cutouts for the frame. The front and rear panels that will go up against the front and rear masonite. And the top rear section, the top front section, and the lid. Okay, here's the basic box. The 2 sides notched into the frame, and then a support piece for the lid along the back. It's also reinforcement for the masonite. Similar piece on the front. And then we have the top rear piece that'll get glued in like this, and the front piece, the top front piece, gets glued in like that. And then, with any luck, this piece may need a little fine tuning to get it to fit right, but the idea is that it'll fit in like that and hinge here and flip up like that. Looks like it'll fit the way it is. Because of the trouble I've been having with epoxies in this humid environment, I've decided to use just regular good old wood glue, which seems to be setting up alright, although it takes a bit longer. And it doesn't fill gaps as well as the epoxy does because it's just runnier. I probably could have made a paste up and thickened it up a little, but I think this will work once it sets. There's adequate wood-to-wood joints that it should be reasonably strong. I have the top rear plate and the lid pre-drilled with small pilot holes. I'm always a little unsure what size to use on these tiny brass screws because they're not very strong. They'll strip out pretty easily, but I also don't want to undersize the holes, so I've taken a guess here. I'm hoping it's right. If I can get one to go in well, then probably the rest will. Okay. And I need to take the Dremel to the back of these because they stick through the wood a little bit. And I have the lid and top pieces. The back part and the front part are glued down. The middle part, of course, is just held in place by the hinge. I don't think I mentioned the hole there. There isn't really room for a knob. I usually put a knob on them or make an overhang that you can just grab the edge of. Because there are parts of the horn that stick down around here, I didn't want to have an overhang. And if I put a knob there, the knob would fit. It wouldn't hit the horn, but when I swing the lid up, it would hit the valence. It would line up right with this, and it would keep the lid more like this, where it would tend to fall shut instead of stay open like I intended it. So I just went with a hole that you can stick your finger in and lift it up. It's smaller than anything that would go in here for storage, so I figure that'll work pretty well. Now hopefully this wood glue will cure properly overnight, and then the case, all it really needs is some touch-up paint, a couple places where I scratched the blue paint a little bit working on it, and putting on the stencils to identify the case and the instrument that's in it, and then it'll be done. And now I put the bumper strip on the lid, so when the horn is in the case, it will either be just above this or touching it lightly, and that will prevent the lid from coming up while the horn is in the case and the case is closed. So there's no way for the contents, mouthpiece or mouthpieces, oils, from getting out and rattling around and banging into the horn. That's a feature of all these cases I make, is that the internal storage compartment cannot physically be open while the instrument's in the case. The other thing is that when the lid is open, putting the horn in the case will not damage the instrument. The lid will always be in a position that it doesn't impact the instrument. There's the storage box, and there it goes. It leans back slightly, although the hinges have enough stiffness in them that it would really stay pretty much anywhere I put it, but that's a pretty good storage space. Definitely enough room for a couple bottles of oil and a mouthpiece or two. So I think that's good. I now need to stencil the case. Going through my assortment of brass stencils, I'm almost certainly going to use the 1-inch ones. I also have a set of 1.5 and a set of 2-inch. The C.H. Hansen Company, venerable maker of brass stencils. So I need to get a couple of ones. Well, naturally I need a number of 11F, and my set has a new F and an old 1. This is actually a mixture of a couple sets, but when I took inventory the last time, this set only did have a single number 1. So something must have been missing from it from the get-go, because I always clean my stencils up. And this would not have been one of mine. It would have been one I got from somewhere else that are compatible. Well, I need another 1. So what I usually do is I either make a copy of one out of cardboard. I've got a number of ones I've made over the years that worked. I can also crank out a stencil from pretty much any material using my stylus, Cameo or whatever it's called, computer controlled cutting machine, but that's a lot of setup for what I'm doing here. So I just cut a piece of 0.051 millimeter shim stock steel. It's like aluminum foil without the crinkles in it, and I think I can cut this with an X-Acto knife. So I'm going to see about using this one as a template and making 1 or 2 more that are the same size. Well, as my British friends would say, it's sort of a dog's breakfast, but it'll work. Okay, I've got the stencil made and masking taped to a sheet of overspray protecting craft paper. And for the stenciling, I'm using more Krylon Acrylic Quick, acrylic lacquer. There's the part number, gloss white. Alright, the stenciling is done. All sides except the bottom. The organization to which this horn, that horn that goes in this, and the case belongs have all of the road cases, the ones that are used to take instruments out on the road for concerts or public demonstrations or seminars or what have you, has a serial number system which is quite informative and brief. The first digit tells you what key the instrument is in, with a 1 meaning an E-flat instrument, a 2 meaning a B-flat or I should say a 1 is an E-flat cornet, a 2 is a B-flat cornet, 3 is an E-flat alto, 4 is a B-flat tenor, you know, and so on going down. 5 is a B-flat bass, 6 is an E-flat bass. The second number tells you the configuration of the instrument. A 1 means it's an over-the-shoulder instrument, and a 2, and then you have bell up, and you've got bell forward, and a circular horn or a helical horn. So the second digit tells you that. And then F is just the order of acquisition within that series. So F being the 6th letter of the alphabet, this is the 6th E-flat over-the-shoulder cornet that was acquired by the organization in the collection. That's all that letter means. So if you're walking around looking for an over-the-shoulder E-flat cornet, you'll have to look no further than a case that has an 11 on it. It's a pretty simple system. And no matter where it goes on a shelf or a truck or wherever, it's instantly identifiable. And the color being this particular shade, nobody else makes instrument cases in this color. So you can easily spot a case that doesn't belong somewhere else and is associated with the organization. So I'm pretty pleased with the way that came out. The lacquer dries almost instantly on here. I could touch that if I wanted to, but I don't want to yet. I really boogered one side of this up. I think it's this side. I got more overshoot on it, and it's a little more bleeded out because I accidentally put my hand there when I was turning the case around to do a stencil on another side and really smeared it up. I had to do a lot of touch-up work and reshoot it a couple of times, and that's why it ended up being more overspray and so on. But other than that, they came out pretty clear. I usually use one or more of my heater fans when I'm working on projects in the basement in the winter because it can get cool down here, although it's dry. But since I was having some problems with epoxy curing, there are still a couple epoxy joints in here, although they're getting slowly better. I think they will eventually cure. I'm going to aim one of these in the general direction of this opened up case, just so it'll get the temperature up. I think I've got this set around 70 degrees or so. It's still warming up. And just have a somewhat warmer temperature around this for one overnight and see if that doesn't help snap the reaction into finality. But I forgot one more thing I'm supposed to do on this, which the fan will also help with. Namely, to put some polyurethane varnish down on the bottom of this box. It doesn't really need to go anywhere else, but if any bottles of oil leak down there, it'll soak right into the masonite, which, although it may not exactly ruin the masonite, it'll soak through and cause all the paint to come off the other side, and then it'll never be repaintable in that spot. So just for that reason alone, I like to usually slop a little varnish down in that area. I've applied polyurethane varnish to the insides, all four sides, and the bottom, but not anywhere else. And it looks like it's really soaked in there, but that's just the color that the masonite gets when it gets even slightly damp. And the parts that are lighter are places where there was wood glue residue, so it's not actually soaking in there, and it didn't turn it dark. But that should lighten up again pretty quickly as the varnish dries. Okay, here's the finished product.